Hello. I want to send our best wishes from Ann Arbor to all of you around the world, to your loved ones, your families, our warmest regards from your family here in Ann Arbor at the University of Michigan and the Ross School of Business. Today, I am joined by distinguished Michigan alumni, Mary Ellen Coe, for our RossTalks series. RossTalks is a series of discussions with leaders around the world where we discuss their defining moments, their careers, lessons learned, their leadership philosophies. It's a place where not only we focus on the past, but we gain insights from leaders and innovators about the future. And today I have the privilege of talking with Mary Ellen Coe, a member of the Ross School Advisory Board and president of Global Customer Solutions at Google, where she and her team are responsible for greater than half of Google's annual ad revenue. Mary Ellen, welcome to RossTalks.
Thanks, Scott. It's great to see you and great to be here.
It is great to see you as well. Thank you for taking time out of what I know is a crazy busy schedule. Mary Ellen, you've had a successful career. You were at McKinsey & Company for many years. You're currently one of the senior most leaders at Google. You've served on or currently serve on boards such as Whole Foods and Merck. You're an innovator, a leader, and someone who, in my opinion, role models the highest principles and character. And so it's in that spirit that I would love to start our conversation today with a question about the defining moments of your career. And in particular, what's a moment in your career? It might be a career choice, it might be an ethical dilemma, it may even be a business decision that you've had to make that was really defining for you, a critical point in your career or life that really defined the path that led you to where you are today. Can you tell us that story?
Yeah, it's interesting because philosophically, I love to tell new employees, students, not to worry about a one defining moment because people become paralyzed by, when something goes wrong. But I do have a moment that was very pivotal in terms of a big lesson for me in my career, and which I'll share and might help others. So when I first joined McKinsey & Company, I actually came from another consulting boutique, and I had just come off maternity leave. I had a brand new baby at home, 3 or 6 months, and I was excited to start at McKinsey & Company, and I was staffed out of town on a post-merger integration. It was a big deal project. It was a moment, right? And so I was very excited about that. And then I was told that I needed to fly out Monday morning and I would come home end of week. And it was like I hit a brick wall. I thought, well, wait, I have this new baby at home. How am I going to do this? I can't do it. And it was really a moment where I had to, check my personal values, think about my professional aspirations. And I was really kind of tied about how to resolve it. So I had a new mentor, someone, who's still a dear colleague today, who said, listen, you have to be there 4 days, but that doesn't mean you have to be there 4 nights. Just go to the managing director and tell them you're going to fly home every Tuesday night and you'll show back up. You won't miss a beat and you're just going to make it happen. And so I had no idea that was very out of the norm. So I just went to the senior most partner who happens to also be on the Ross Advisory Board, John Cook. And I said to John, John, this is what I'm going to do. It won't be a problem. Just don't worry about it. And he looked at me kind of in a stunned way and said, okay. And so on we went. And so I flew back and forth and it really just gave me the peace of mind. I would get home one night, I would see the baby was fine. My husband was, incredibly supportive. And up until 9/11 hit, I was just flying back and forth a couple times a week. And it was just a real lesson in someone on the team, a colleague that I was staffed with said, what makes you so special that you get to do this? And I thought, and I said to him, because I had the guts to ask. And, the takeaway to me, and I tell people this all the time, what leaders and managers are most concerned about is impact. And if you focus on thinking about your boundaries, what are the conditions you can work within, and really sharing that and having an open conversation about it. It's amazing the things that you can do. And that really was a kickoff to a 12-year wonderful experience at McKinsey that I wouldn't have had if I would have just quit and left and not had that arrangement. So that was kind of pivotal in lessons learned.
Yeah, it's such a compelling story in part because you were crystal clear about the values that you wanted to guide your decisions, your life, and something you said, the courage to ask.
Yes.
And this is something I talk with our students about all the time at the Ross School, is having the courage to just ask.
Yes.
And it could be ask for help. It could be ask for support. It could be ask for something that's going to enable you to be who you want to be.
Yes.
People are operating often from a place of fear.
Yes.
Right. That they're afraid of disappointing or not living up to expectations. But I found, like you, quite the contrary. If you live by your values, you're very clear about what you find important, and you have the courage to live that life, people respect that.
Absolutely. And I tell people this all the time. We walk around and make assumptions about what can't happen, what we can't do, what expectations are, and having that open conversation. And I often say to managers, help grease the skids a little by sharing that with your team, by sharing and saying, hey, everyone's welcome to come to me, and just to get the dialogue going. Because you're right, there is a lot of fear. And I actually think having that courage can do a lot in terms of creating better circumstances for you.
Yeah, absolutely. And we take off some of these self-imposed constraints, and then we're able to thrive in ways that we wouldn't otherwise be able to do. And so living those values, you've built an amazingly strong career. You've developed your leadership skills. You've established an amazing personal brand, not only within Google, but globally. And one of the things that I know our students are often interested in, our faculty, our staff, and actually many of our alumni, if I think of the questions that people ask, is how do you build a personal brand for long-term success? So I'd love to learn about what advice do you have for people who maybe are just starting their careers or maybe are further advanced in their careers about building your personal brand, not just only for short-term gain, but long-term success.
Yeah. It's something that I think you develop over time. I remember when my first foray into leading a very large team, and we were preparing, and they said, what are the values that you want to communicate? And I thought, well, it's really important to step back at certain points in your career and say, what do I want to be known for? What are the values, the behaviors that I value greatly? And it's important to me about, the way I run the business. So reflecting on that and using those as a true north, and importantly, not only kind of taking stock of it, but every 6 months or so, reflecting back, have I been living and role modeling true to those values? And really importantly, and this is a step a lot of people don't take, getting feedback. And do others perceive you as living to those values? And, it's not enough just to get it, but to, internalize it and reflect. And I think all of us at some point in our career have gotten feedback that's incongruent with how we'd like to be perceived, what we think our brand is all about. And those are the real moments of leadership, self-reflection, right? I'm obviously not showing up how I desire to. How can I course correct? What can I do differently to communicate that?
Yeah, you are singing a wonderful tune that resonates with me quite a bit. One of my favorite studies that one of our Michigan Ross faculty did is one of my colleagues, Sue Ashford, created this concept now a number of years ago called feedback seeking. Right? We often receive feedback, and we wait for our boss or our colleagues to give us feedback. But the act of going out and seeking that feedback, and one of her original studies on feedback seeking, she showed that, with people like us in professional settings, that if you seek feedback from others, even if the feedback is negative or constructive, whatever you want to call it, that person that gives you that feedback has a more positive impression of you.
Oh, that's
even
really
if their feedback is negative.
Yeah.
right? And it's because you're demonstrating a commitment to personal growth and learning and the like, and it creates a stronger relationship you have with that person because you're respecting them enough to come and seek the feedback.
There's some reciprocity there. One of my kind of biggest challenges that surprised me was taking over a very high performing team from a colleague who had a very different leadership style than I have. And the team didn't know what to expect, right? Expectation management is so critical. And I now have watched people literally send memos out where they'll say, here's who I am, here's what I value, here's what you can expect from me, which sounds a little fabricated, but quite frankly, I think is very helpful to a team because ultimately people are trying to figure you out. What are your expectations? And when you come in and there's that incongruence, it can be unsettling to your team. So you've got to create that safety, that sense of, I understand what's expected and I can perform to that.
Yeah. So I'd love to just to probe on that for a moment. So, when you took over that high performing team, 'cause that's something a lot of our both students and alumni are very interested in. How do you show up to really get people not only comfortable with, but aware of and excited about, in some sense, the leadership philosophy and style that you're going to bring? How do you think about showing up to that team on day one?
Yeah. So I made the mistake of assuming that my leadership, I like, for example, in a leadership forum, a lot of open debate. Mm-hmm. I think open debate is really healthy, and I like to have different views on a topic. Whereas my predecessor liked a more formal process where there was a recommend, right? Both are fine, very different though, right? And so I assumed everyone would feel comfortable. The very senior leaders, and I'd say, person X, what do you think? Which in having come from a very different style, I think left them feeling quite vulnerable. And as if there was a right or wrong answer. So I've learned to, particularly with more junior members of the team now, say, here's how we treat this meeting. Here's the types of things you can expect. You should feel free to speak, to, in a sense, establish the norms so that people get a little bit of the rules of the road.
Yeah, no, that's extraordinarily insightful. And by establishing those norms and helping manage expectations, you build not only a level of trust and credibility, but you build that psychological sort of safety on the other side, where people feel that they can have the courage to ask. They have the courage to speak up and engage in that debate, even if they're the more junior people in the team. So I think that's really a hallmark and a foundation of great leadership, especially in today's environment.
Absolutely. Yeah. One thing, when we talk about the courage point again, this was always a norm and a philosophy at McKinsey, the right to dissent. And particularly for students who are going to be new in their careers, it's really important for you to think about, you have a responsibility to bring a perspective to the table. Think of yourself as your value add is a fresh perspective, is a new perspective. And in a constructive way, obviously, we don't want to be disruptive, but when you bring that mindset, every situation doesn't become a torture test or a pressure test of, are you capable or not, right? It just inspires you to speak more freely.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think if we were able to create cultures and environments where people feel free to dissent, we can debate, we can disagree, but then at the end, when we make a decision, everybody commit, right? I mean, one of the things I say to my team is disagree and commit, right?
Yes.
And so that resonates really strongly with me.
Yes.
So Mary Ellen, the last roughly year has been remarkable, right? And extraordinary, not all in positive ways, right? We face some very significant challenges. We were forced in a situation where we had to lead our organizations through, an unprecedented health crisis, public health crisis on a really global scale. During that same time, issues of social justice and race and inequality became center stage for all business leaders,
Yeah.
right? These were issues that all business leaders were faced to address and to deal with in their own organizations. I'd love to tap into the lessons that you've learned over the last year in leading your organization through, some of these crises and challenges that have really come to define the business environment of today. What have you learned over the last year as you've led your group through the ups and downs and twists and turns?
Yeah. Oh, it's been quite a journey, and it's such an important conversation right now in all arenas of leadership. I think personally, as I came into the year, I underestimated the importance of, we always talk about living values. I underestimated the importance of speaking openly and frequently to reinforce those values, to reinforce the importance of anti-racist behavior, as an example. That was really important to the team, not to just assume good intent, but to make sure that as the most senior leader, in an organization of thousands of people, that I openly spoke about everyone's personal responsibility and commitment to anti-racist behavior, as an example. The other thing that I think has changed a lot, certainly since I started, years ago in my career, when only 5% of the partners at McKinsey were women, right? So very different expectations. If I would have expected senior leaders who looked like me, I would have been woefully disappointed. But that is an expectation now, and that's something that the team has really helped me learn more and understand. Our Googlers, as we call them, right? They expect to see senior leaders, Black, Latinx, lots of women. And it's not enough to say, well, we're hiring, new entrants into the organization, right? They want to see senior leadership. I had a really powerful situation that really kind of, as I reflect on, we had a global Black conference of all Googlers around the world. Everyone converged in Mountain View. This is right before COVID. And I had a woman stand up and she said, Mary Ellen, Ruth Porat recommended that I speak with you and that I come to your team. And I looked you up on the internal system and I looked at your direct reports and there was no one that looked like me. And there was, no Black Googler on your team. And so I decided I would go find a role somewhere else. And this was a very talented senior leader. And that spoke to me. We were in front of 200 colleagues and I said, I'm so sorry. And I lost great talent because she was expecting, as a leader that I would be supporting that type of representation. So those are really critical moments to understand how important those kinds of changes are to people. And, I think we all have a responsibility to really lean into that.
Yeah, it's so important. The point you make about how important it is for us as leaders to give voice to values, right? And consistently give voice to values, I think is more important today than maybe it's ever been before in leadership. And your point about sort of the composition of our organizations, we face the same thing in higher education and business schools globally, and certainly here at the Ross School, where, 20, 30 years ago, we weren't hiring like we are today. Yeah. Right. And that's not an excuse. That's just a description of the reality. We don't get a pass for that. Yeah. Right. We have to create a faculty and a staff that is representative of the community that we're trying to serve. Exactly. And it's hard to do in a short period of time, but we have to do it. Exactly. Right. There has to be a purposeful commitment there, not just happenstance. Absolutely. Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. How has, you've been at Google for some time now, and over the past, year or so with these challenges that we have faced and continue to face, how have you seen the organization? So not just yourself in terms of from a leadership perspective, but how have you seen the organization adapt to these moments and movements to really grow and become a better organization? Yeah, really,
leadership accountability, right? I think, and many organizations have gone through these transitions where you might have diversity, equity, and inclusion leaders in your human resources organization, right? Who are helping support infrastructure and programming. But at the end of the day, we're accountable as senior leaders and need to hold ourselves and our teams responsible for creating environments, creating cultures where everyone has the ability to succeed to the best of their abilities. And I think there's been a misunderstanding, right? People will, we've all learned a lot more about unconscious bias. And that's table stakes. I think we're all on a journey of learning. People come from very different circumstances, right? They don't have the same advantages, the networks, the education, the experiences. And so we as business leaders need to, in a sense, level the playing field so that we don't make assumptions. And you and I have talked about this. We would hire undergraduates and put them into a training program and just say, go, and then do a performance review at the end of 6 months. People end up at very different places because of the accumulation of, or the cumulative impact or backgrounds they have. So we need to do a much better job onboarding, leveling that playing field so people can really, lift themselves up, and we're lifting others up. There's a lot of, discussion about that, and we're looking at all of our programming more comprehensively to make sure we're doing that.
Yeah, it's really powerful. I know from our perspective as an educational institution, I mean, we are one of the institutions that plays a role in systemic advantage or disadvantage. Right. And so how we think about who's part of our community and the role that we play and the responsibility that we have in helping lift people up. And what I'm finding very inspiring over the past year and more honestly, but certainly it's come to the foreground in the last year, is how institutions, whether it be in education or organizations like Google and private sector companies and the like, are now seeing not only opportunities, but also responsibilities.
Absolutely.
And that's how we're going to create really sustainable change in our societies. And so it's really powerful. Now, you lead one of the largest businesses at Google. You're on the leading edge of innovation and technology and business. And you and I have talked about this. In 2020, we experienced what some might refer to as a once in a lifetime digitization event, right?
Yeah.
I mean,
that's a mouthful, but so true. Yeah.
And COVID has had the pandemic globally has had a profound impact on consumer behavior in all arenas. It's shaped how we live, how we work, how we connect, how we shop, how we spend our free time, how we consume content, how we consume video, just how we interact with each other. Even something like this, right? Yeah. And so in many ways, the pandemic has accelerated the use of technology and digital tools, some might estimate by a decade or more. Yeah. Can you talk about how you're seeing businesses of all sizes and shapes using technology to really redesign, reinvent, reshape their business models, how they reach customers, and how they grow? Can you talk about some of the trends that you're seeing in how business is evolving?
Yeah, it's in a sense, it's the silver lining of the pandemic. My job is to champion small businesses and small and mid-cap businesses around the world. And this has been incredibly challenging. It's devastated local businesses with the shutdowns. And I was doing a radio broadcast with a radio host out of Chicago who does a US podcast for small businesses. We talked about the two key trends. People are wanting to act local, right? Everybody wants to support their local community right now. And so there's more funding and more consumer sentiment in favor of local spend and action. At the same time, there's a real rush to online. And so we talked about the contrast and how do those two things come together. And a lot of what we're seeing are small businesses, like think about a local retail store that you might go to in Ann Arbor. We've all seen our favorite restaurants, right? When they could only do carry out. starting to do online delivery, right? Or online to offline, where I can purchase online and pick up locally, right? Which is, a incredibly fast growing shopping tool that we have now. So these small businesses, we have export. So whether it be a business in the US, one state that's now exporting to another state. So we have a maple syrup company out of Wisconsin who's exporting all across the United States now and is seeing their business grow 10x. Or, I don't know if anyone saw the big trend this holiday season for onesies, which are sold out of the Nordics and they export to the United States. So there are all kinds of tools, in a sense, for these businesses to reach whole new audiences in new ways. And it really is the silver lining, because the growth we're seeing, e-commerce, retail, and even just local businesses pivoting their model to be able to survive and thrive in some circumstances. So it's really keeping our team motivated. I think we've all been challenged with, working from home and the situation, but the team is incredibly motivated seeing these stories of success. And we get letters from businesses all the time. We were able to give out close to $350 million in ads credits so that small businesses could actually use it to reach new audiences, try new things. So it's been kind of an exciting time of change.
Yeah, and it's extraordinarily inspiring. And I mean, there's so many small businesses across the country and the globe, and to see them reinvent how they reach customers and their growth strategies is really impressive. I know one of the things that's been very inspiring within our community here, to the same tune, is a number of our faculty, especially early on in the pandemic, mobilized with local businesses here in Ann Arbor and the surrounding area to figure out ways that we could help them.
Oh, yeah.
Right. And so a lot of our student projects, for example, that we would normally do with a Google,
yeah.
Right. We still do them with Google, of course.
Yeah.
But some of those shifted to local, small, medium-sized businesses here in the area, so that we could use the expertise and the capacity here at the school, both from a faculty perspective as well as a student perspective, to begin contributing to those small and medium-sized businesses here locally.
Yeah.
And so we're seeing a lot of the same things on the education side as well.
Okay, so you'll know, and I think there's great business education in working with small businesses, because the access to capital,
Yep.
cash flow is so much more incredibly important, right? And an immediate ROI and a measurable ROI. So there are several key lessons about business management that you really kind of put to the test in a small business environment. So I think it's a great test for the students.
Yeah, it absolutely is. Because I mean, and you get to see all the aspects, all the functions of the business, because you can get your hands around it, right? As opposed to being just in the marketing group or just in the finance group and so forth. We've got a program called Ross Open Road, where our students go out across the country and work with what we call Main Street as opposed to Wall Street. Yeah. And the demand for that type of program has just gone through the roof. During the pandemic, which is really inspiring. I've got some pretty lofty goals for what we can do with small businesses across the country, and maybe there's even a partnership with Google in there that we could create.
I was doing, I think it's got, I do customer shadowing calls, and every once in a while I'll pop in and introduce myself and with the rep and tell them I want to hear what their feedback on Google is and what the challenges are. And I was doing one right before the holidays, and as it ends up, it was for a gift basket business. And the owner is actually a CMO of a leading company, which I won't mention, but he was doing this on the side, and the business has been so successful. It's become a hobby business for his family, and I'm very, very successful. And he was talking about managing, working in a corporate environment versus his family, hobby business that's so successful. So one of their most popular gift baskets had champagne in it, and they ran out from a supply chain perspective. They ran out of champagne, so he had to run over to Costco to send to it, right? So lots of really fun lessons learned in that environment.
Yeah. I'd love to interview that person to understand the incentives that are used in the family to motivate behavior as opposed to the corporate world. Maybe
Exactly.
I can only imagine the difference in incentives that are used and the like. So,
Yeah.
Marilyn, one of my favorite questions for folks when we do Ross Talks is really the advice question that you have. I mean, we've got amazingly talented students and alumni in our community, and many are either starting their careers, starting their business school journey, and many are obviously advanced and further along in their careers. But what is for those folks that are starting their, say, business school journey?
Right.
What is one piece of advice that you would give those students?
Yeah. I have so much advice. So if anyone wants to reach out, I've got lots of advice to give. Two key things I think about. One is everybody believes there's a path that reveals itself, right? Whether it's I'm going to be an investment banker or, in a sense, they have this idealized journey. And I always say to students or to new members of the team, it's okay to not know exactly what you want to do, or career journeys are not always linear, right? So just trying something, think about what do you think you're passionate about? If it's data analytics and statistical analysis of sports scores, as an example, how could you parlay that into a job that you're excited about? And jobs are very trial and error, right? It's better to try something. You can always course correct. So that idea of, try new things, and your journey will not be linear. It doesn't have to be, and that's okay. You'll end up in a great place. The second piece, and this is particularly true right now with COVID disrupting internships and hiring, it's all okay as long as you can hustle, right? My keyword is hustle. Alumni, I know all of the alumni watching right now, we all want to help students and get opportunities. And if you can be entrepreneurial and hustle and just reach out to people, you will find so much help and so much uptake. And it's on you to really make it happen. Get creative. If we don't respond to one email, send us 2 more with a fun GIF in it, right? And that you can't underestimate the importance of that hustle. Things more and more, we're in an environment where things are not going to happen as expected or standard. And you really making your luck and hustling is a great way to address that.
Yeah, the courage to hustle, right?
Yes,
the courage to send that email, right?
Yes.
I tell our students all the time, like, especially the University of Michigan and the Ross School alumni base, it's the largest alumni network in the world.
Yeah.
But it's also recognized as the most helpful, right? And our alumni, and it's in the spirit of pay it forward.
Absolutely.
And pay it back, right? Because at one point you were that student who was building up the courage to send that email and ask, right? And you remember that.
I remember so clearly, right?
Yeah, and so you want to do the same. And so it's I think that's a very, very sound advice. It's not a linear path. It's going to have its twists and turns. And to continue just to explore and have the courage to do so and build those relationships and those networks. So, Mary Ellen, I want to thank you. Thank you so much for joining me for our Ross Talks. These are so fun, inspiring, and insightful. You're a wonderful alum of the university. You're a true champion for the Ross School of Business. And most importantly for me, you're just a dear friend who I cherish. So thank you so much.
Oh, it's such a pleasure. Go Blue. And it's just really fun to have these conversations and talk about all the opportunities. So thanks so much, Scott.
Thank you very, very much.